Hey, Sun here. In today's episode, I want to answer a question that one of you asked in the comments. In the context of sensitive computing, where one aspires to erase the entire hard drive once we're done, is it as secure to use older Intel-based Macs as it is to use contemporary Apple Silicon Macs? Now, that person specifically asked in the context of using SuperBacked to generate encrypted paper backups. The idea is when you print, for instance, on Mac, cups will actually store on the hard drive a version of everything you print. Now, if the goal is to set up a governance scheme where you don't want all blocks of a SuperBacked block set to be at the same place at the same time, well, from a data forensic perspective, you don't want that material that you printed to persist on the computer itself. So what we recommend for sensitive use cases of SuperBacked is to use an Apple Silicon Mac, install SuperBacked, disconnect Wi-Fi, generate the blocks, print them using an AirPrint printer that is local over USB, and then click the Apple system settings, then go in general, transfer or reset and erase all content and settings. And that essentially resets that computer to factory defaults, essentially crypto shredding any piece of data that was on the hard drive. Crypto shredding essentially means that the encryption key has been deterministically destroyed, and as a result, all the data on the disk is encrypted using AES-256 and is therefore forever unreadable. Now, what's the difference between an older Mac, say a 2015 MacBook Pro that is Intel-based, and an Apple Silicon Mac? Well, the difference is a very interesting aspect of contemporary Macs and, by the way, iPhones. On those contemporary pieces of hardware, so for Macs, it's T2 equipped Macs or Apple Silicon Macs, they have something called a secure enclave, which is a specific piece of the chipset that is used for cryptographic stuff that also has some other very interesting piece of hardware called effaceable storage. Effaceable storage is a specific part of the storage architecture that is addressable on which encryption keys are stored. You can specifically address that effaceable storage and erase keys, therefore crypto shredding the entire computer. So if your iPhone or Mac has this erase all content and settings feature that when you click it within about a minute, the computer is wiped clean, that means that you're using a T2 equipped Mac or you're using an Apple Silicon Mac and or iPhone, and that means that that device is actually safe to pass on to someone. So if you're using SuperBacked for, say, backing up a Bitcoin mnemonic, and you trust Apple, which, by the way, not everyone does, but let's say you assume that Apple is not evil to the point to extract your mnemonic. Well, you could theoretically go to the Apple Store, buy an Apple Silicon MacBook Air, download SuperBacked, disconnect Wi-Fi, use SuperBacked, print over AirPrint over USB, erase all content and settings on the Mac, bring it back to the Apple Store, and sleep like a baby. Now, in contrast to older Macs also have FileVault. And in the context of external drives, you can also enable encryption for APFS on them. The big caveat is that on these two different use cases, the encryption key does not benefit from the secure enclave, and it does not benefit from effaceable storage. What that means is the encryption key is actually encrypted and stored on the disk itself. Now, if the credentials behind that encryption key wrapper are weak, let's say the password is not great, or let's say quantum computing or sophisticated computer clusters are able to essentially breach the key derivation function, well, that means that someone could potentially eventually get access to the underlying key material and access the entire hard drive, even though you think you've erased it. Hey, Son of the Future here, editing this episode. I forgot to mention something that's really important. On older SSD hard drives, such as the 2015 Macs, or on most hard drives that you'll use on any computer today, or on SD cards or USB flash drives, it's just not possible to address a specific area of flash storage to essentially delete keys. That is the killer feature that effaceable storage offers on T2 Equip Macs or Apple Silicon Macs. So the problem is, if you cannot address a specific part of it, the only option you have is to override the entire thing. And now not only is this very inefficient and will really reduce the lifespan of that specific disk, the problem also is that those disks have something called wear leveling, where in order to not override a specific area multiple times, destroying it, that's how NAND storage works, it does wear leveling, so it levels usage across the entire disk. When you delete something, it doesn't necessarily delete it. And if that's not bad enough, there's also something called over-provisioning. Manufacturers know that the drive will fail, and as a result, usually over-provision the disk. So let's say you have a 256, you actually have more than 256 on it. The only problem is the operating system cannot address areas that have been over-provisioned. So long story short, you just don't have a way of deterministically destroying keys. Back to the episode. The TLDR is, if you're using SuperBacked or any other app and you aspire to secure erase a hard drive, you cannot do this on Macs that don't have a T2 chip or that don't run on Apple Silicon. On older Macs, such as this 2015 MacBook Pro, you can use SuperBacked on that computer. SuperBacked is designed in a way to run on Intel Macs, but you have to know that you cannot secure erase the hard drive from a data forensics perspective. But you can run SuperBacked OS on older Macs 2015 and earlier. I haven't tested them all, but that's a really good segue to sharing this new page that I've created on the SuperBacked repository on GitHub, which, by the way, you can totally star if you like the idea and the project. That specific page references recommended hardware that I've tested and know that you can either run the app or SuperBacked OS, and also that the webcam, either internal, built-in, or external, such as the Razer Kaio X, are capable of scanning dense QR codes, such as this one, in good or poor lighting. Now, if you want to help, it would be amazing if you could add hardware to that list. And that would really help the whole SuperBacked community figure out which devices can be used, especially if you're using SuperBacked OS, which is a hardened ephemeral version of Ubuntu. It's hard to find computers that can run Ubuntu with good driver support out of the box with SuperBacked OS and a webcam that is capable of scanning really dense QR codes. Something that probably a lot of you don't know unless you're an Apple developer is that Apple actually has really sophisticated QR scanning algorithms that are part of the macOS operating system. And that's why scanning codes is so amazing on Mac. Plus the webcam on M2 MacBook Airs, for instance, is just spectacular. It's really hard to find an equivalent to this in the context of Linux. And we do use all kinds of tricks to make scanning better on Linux, but it's still hard to find good hardware. So if you can let us know what kind of hardware you're using and submit a signed pull request to that recommended hardware page, that would be amazing. Anyways, that's all I have for you today. I'll see you soon. Bye.